Hello, folks. Welcome back to the CR's Principles and Testimonies. I'm your host, Jason. Uh, if you're new to the channel, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you wish, you could hit the subscribe button and get all the latest notifications. Subscribe to the channel if you don't mind. I've got my Andrew Hager shirt on today. He runs a charity event out of Versailles, Kentucky called the Blameless Children. And I just thought I'd support him with my T-shirt today. Anyway, it's a once in a year event, and he buys children Christmas presents if they're for children whose parents are into madness and can't really afford them a Christmas gift. And he holds this event to raise money for it, and he'll have singing and testimonies and all kinds of stuff there just to raise money, and it's all donated to the benefit, which is the Blameless Children. Anyway, with that, today's video is sponsored by James 414 Vape Sales. It's James 414 Vape Sales. They're out of Mount Vernon, Kentucky. They have everything vape. I call it vape heaven myself. But they're really good people. They're on 461 on the way to Somerset out of Mount Vernon, Kentucky. There. Uh, so if you vape and you need some supplies, go ahead and stop by if you don't mind. With that, let's just jump into it. Today, we're on Principle 4 Testimony. It's about a girl named Marnie. My name is Marnie, and I'm a great believer in Jesus Christ who struggles with sexual addiction and food issues. I wish I could start this story once upon a time, or there once was a little girl, but instead it starts like this: a broken home, treacherous abuse, fits of rage, and being stripped away from those I held dear to my heart. And this was just a fraction of my childhood that began my forbidden lifestyle filled with fantasy, sex, and lust. My path to recovery started at Saddleback Church in November of 2000. I remember that night well. I crawled in broken and completely unaware of reality. My view on life had become so distorted and my actions had become so out of control that I don't think the enemy himself could keep up. The enemy being the devil, of course. That night, I watched as people smiled, hugged, and celebrated because it happened to be the ninth anniversary of Celebrate Recovery. I arrived in an hour early, completely unaware that the worship service didn't start until 7 o'clock. So I sat there and listened to the band rehearse. I remember sitting there almost all alone with only a handful of people walking around setting things up. As I looked around, the tears began to form in my eyes, and it was all I could do to blink them back. I didn't know what I was doing here. My thoughts were wandering and had become so disjointed with everything within me wanted to get up and walk out. It was evident I was still in denial. I kept hearing the same thoughts repeating themselves in my head. Whatever is wrong with these people is way worse than anything I could have done. And whatever I've done, I'm sure I can fix it on my own. But for some reason, I just could not bring myself to get up and get up out of that chair and leave. I was startled as the man that came up behind me put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Excuse me, but this seat is taken." As I looked around the empty room, it took me a while to realize that he was kidding. But just in those few words, I felt a sense of comfort and relief. I felt welcomed and a little less out of place. That night, I attended the Newcomers 101, where for the first time I confessed my secrets. I managed to utter the words that I had gone unspoken for years. I cheated on my husbands, and moments after that, I began to sob. That was it. That was all I said. The woman who was leading 101 that night leaned forward and cupped my hands in hers and told me for the first time, "Everything is going to be okay. You've come to the right place." The sincerity in her voice warmed me. Long before I was born, I was already there was already turmoil brewing in my family. Before my first birthday, my parents had finalized their plans to divorce. My older sister and I were sent to live with my father and grandparents in Hawaii. Excuse me. Once we arrived, my dad conveniently left the scene. My grandparents were unofficially assigned to care for us as if we were their own. My fondest childhood memories are of those years I spent with my grandparents in Hawaii. They taught me about Jesus, and by their example, I learned Christian values. Thankfully, they showed me what it was like to live in a normal family. My parents, on the other hand, were diabolical opposites of my grandparents. My father is a functioning alcoholic who also has a wondering eye for women. I watched as my dad moved from relationship to relationship and as his addiction to pornography and alcohol grew. His complete disregard for his calling as a father allowed me plenty of time to explore as a young child. I can remember being crouched in a corner with my sister as we attempted to smoke cigarettes and drink some of my dad's beer. As a young girl, curiosity took me by surprise one day when I was snooping around in the house and found my dad's Playboy collection hidden in the dresser drawers. I felt as though I had stumbled upon a secret and I ran out of the bedroom. But at the same time, I was intrigued by the images I saw. Often my dad would take me and my sister to his girlfriend's house where they would abandon us in the living room and told us to watch television while my dad retreated into the bedroom with his girlfriend. Even at such a young age, I was well aware of what they were doing. I viewed this as a total acceptable lifestyle. My last encounter with my father was when I was in my 20s, the day I wandered onto his patio, finding him enraged, drunken man waving a butcher knife in my face. At the age of 5, I moved back to California to live with my mother. She had the personality of a raging alcoholic, minus the alcohol. The movie Mommy Dearest came to mind. She was physically, verbally, and emotionally abusive. One unpleasant incident that sticks out in my mind the most when I was packing to go on a camping trip with family friends. I walked in on one of her fits of rage. She had slapped me in the face so hard that a tooth punctured my lip. Needless to say, I had a huge fat lip and a black eye the following day. I told everyone that I had been eating and that my fork had slipped. She always apologized and said she hated what she had done, but in the next breath she would tell me I deserved it. I didn't know how many times I ended up in the hospital as a young girl. I remember vividly my mother being sent out of the room and the doctors asking me, "Did your mother hit you?" And with a stoic face, my response always being a simple shake of the head no. Throughout my childhood, I became my mother's human pinata, often a victim of choking and dodging mirrors she threw at me. I also have been beaten with lamps, hangers, high-heeled shoes, and whatever else was within reach. To cope with my dysfunctional life, I escaped into a fantasy life filled with lustful thoughts of pornographic images that were embedded in my mind. I would stay in bed for hours fantasizing about sexual acts and replaying the same dreams over and over again in my head. My upbringing was so filled with turmoil that I had no choice but to escape the insanity. Just before the start of my senior year in high school, I emancipated myself, and at the age of 17, I was recognized as an adult. I moved out and was on my own. I was determined to break the cycle of dysfunction I had been living with all my life, but I had become a product of my environment. I married my high school sweetheart, and in June of '98, marriage started out difficult for us. Although we had dated for 8 years prior to getting married, it almost seemed that in an instant we had grown miles apart, as as if our years together somehow been reversed. Our conversations were no longer familiar. Instead, we stuck to superficial topics. Hard times were beginning to materialize. We were struggling financially and we were living with his parents. The enemy sank his fangs deep into me as I viewed my marriage as a mistake, a verbal blunder, so to speak. A rural penitentiary, bitterness, resentment, and hatred started to paint an ugly picture as my visions of normal lifestyle fell by the wayside. We went through months of arguing and a lot of broken promises. I felt like I was running in place. I felt taken advantage of, disrespected, unappreciated, and I felt like I had no voice and no control. I felt robbed of my dreams. Most of all, I felt emotionally bankrupt. It was then that my behavior exploded into uncontrollable fury. My solution, adultery. Just 10 short months into my marriage, I had cheated on my husband. As an addictive lifestyle was starting to take shape, I took a new position at work which would require me to fly to the Bay Area every Monday and fly home every Thursday. All of this free time away from my husband gave me the freedom to make my own choices, which only fueled my unhealthy behaviors. In my denial, life never felt so good. Sorry, I'm on. Take a drink of my coffee. I was getting attention from men I hardly knew and who hardly knew me. Every day, I became more and more independent of my marriage. I felt in control. I was becoming more and more independent of my marriage. I finally doing something I thought I wanted to do instead of having to live by someone else's rules. But in my heart, I knew something was desperately wrong. I struggled with confusion about the Christian values I had been taught as a child versus what the world would deem as sociably acceptable behavior. I suddenly felt as if I only knew these childhood beliefs intellectually. For the first time in my life, my faith in God had been tried and shaken, because at this point in my life, my relationship with the Lord was non existent. I ignored those feelings and instead replaced them with alcohol and anorexia and adultery. I was now on a suicide mission, devoted to a life of deception. My life became intertwined with the very woman I had been warned against in my childhood Bible teachings, Jezebel, Potiphar's wife, and Delilah. My life now had become a reflection of the woman whose greatest accomplishment in life was the destruction of the man who loved them the most. My forbidden lifestyle progressed into a double life. I continued keeping up the variety of appearances that had sustained me through the years. At work, I was a balanced, poised professional. I would walk in with a smile on my face and go to my office, shut the door, and act out with internet pornography in chat rooms. When I was in when I was with my college friends, I was the baby. I played the innocent, codependent Marnie, the good girl, the Marnie who never drank but just took care of the rest of the bunch when they did. At church, I was a devout Christian pedesto, living from listening from the concrete bench outside, but making sure my friends and family all knew I was present and accounted for. But the real Marnie, the uninhibited Marnie, surfaced after work hours, where I would spend most of my free time at the bars with the good old boys club. I could tell a good dirty joke or two and just be one of the guys. The more I drank, the more I talked. The more I talked, the more I started blaming my circumstances for my behavior. My drinking buddies got the unvarnished story of how awful life was like for me at home. I became completely cavalier with total disregard and disrespect for myself and for those around me. My life was a righteous mess. My insatiable appetite for more manifested itself as I attempted to fill the void within me, only to find that the beast of ugliness would in no way be satisfied. From my form of self punishment and control was to starve my body, both spiritually and physically. Body image became the most important thing to me than anything else in my life, including the people I love the most. I was now on a quest for the perfect figure, no matter what it cost. Starving myself made me feel like I was making my own decisions. I put myself on a rigid diet which consists of a handful of grapes each day and an excessive amount of Diet Coke. I decided what I put in my body. I decided what I would look like. I started working out obsessively, running between 12 and 15 miles a day. This lifestyle, coupled with my sexual addiction, left my body weak and out of fuel. I weighed a mere 92 pounds with a sunken face and was rapidly self-destructing. My addiction was now in full throttle. As I saw the scenes of my life unfolding, I became desperate to find freedom from my web of deception. I picked up the phone and called Saddleback Church, and they suggested I try Celebrate Recovery. During that time, which I had recalled the Christian values taught to me as a child by my grandparents, which I had buried due to my anger and resentment toward God, he had finally gotten my attention. It was then that I realized I do not understand myself at all, for I really want to do what is right, but I can't. I do what I don't want to, what I hate. I know perfectly well what I am doing is wrong and bad, and my bad conscience I agree with these laws proves that I agree with these laws that I am breaking, but I cannot help myself because I am no longer doing it. It is the sin inside me that is stronger than I am, makes me do these evil things. Romans 7:15 through 20. At this point, I felt as if I had been hollowed out, and the world as I knew it was slowly being erased. I didn't know how to reconcile these conflicting pieces of my past. The pain I had finally become greater than the fear. I had reached my bottom. 2 months after the first fateful night in Celebrate Recovery, a woman's step study group opened. So I picked up my Celebrate Recovery Bible and a set of Celebrate Recovery Participants Guide and began pilgrimaging, pilgrimaging, pilgr- pilgrimage through the Christ-centered 12 steps with women I could relate to and who could also relate to me, and where secrets seemed all but impossible. At first, I kept myself at a safe distance. I would guard my secrets so that no one could use them, knew, so no one could use what they knew to hurt me. I also felt hideously ugly, and though the scars that I had been that had been left behind were visible to everyone. But as I began to share for the first time, I saw women who just stayed silent throughout, listening without judgment. I began to grasp this internal battle I was having was not uncommon. It was then that I started to understand how the pains of my past played a critical part in my behavior. I started realizing that I was in a cycle of addiction all my life. I viewed men as objects and was imitating what I had learned in my childhood. I kept so many childhood secrets in my adult life, and secrets in my marriage. But by saying them out loud, it brought some truth to my reality. So I found comfort in the fact that I could not be perfect. There was no such thing as a perfect marriage or a perfect body. Most importantly, I saw just how far I had fallen away from my relationship with Christ. Problems far too big for me to solve are piled higher than my head. Meanwhile, my sins are too many to count, have all caught up with me, and I am ashamed to look up. Psalms 40:12. Principle 4 says, openly examine and confess my thoughts to myself, to God and to someone I trust. Happy are the pure at heart. Matthew 5:8. I am beginning to explore this new uncharted territory at Celebrate Recovery by working this principle, and the true healing began. It was then that I heard God's promise of freedom and to stop acting out. It was then that I realized that whatever is covered up will be uncovered, and that every secret will be made known. So then, whatever you have said in the dark will be heard in broad daylight. Luke 12:2 through 3. As I laid my sins at the foot of the cross and turned from my addictions, God declared me not guilty. He blotted out the charges proven against you and the list of his commandments which you had not obeyed. He took this list of sins and destroyed them by nailing them to the Christ's cross. Colossians 2:13 through 15. I have reconciled my relationship with my husband, and today my relationship my relationship is built on honesty and trust. My marriage has been restored. The ships are built on honesty, and the challenges are still there. Marriage takes work, and my new view on marriage is that every couple needs to argue every now and then just to prove their relationship is strong enough to survive it. When we have been blessed with the most precious gifts of all, two beautiful baby girls. The new ministry in my life is my family. Where they once played second fiddle to my work and my addictive behavior, they now are my priority. In fact, in this day and age where people are so accessible with smartphones, iPads, iPods, etc., our family has a rule: no electronics at the table. Most importantly, I am teaching my children that nothing is more important than my time with them. No email, text, tweet, phone call, or whatever. As for my mom and dad, I have found it in my heart to forgive them, although I still do not have a relationship with either of them, though I have made attempts over the years. I remain steadfast in the fact that neither of them are safe people to have around me, my husband, or my girls. Neither of them live Neither of them has changed their behaviors, and unfortunately they have been left to their own misery. I have learned now how to embrace the pain and made the choices to abandon my life of deception and destruction. As I reflect on my own life now, I thank God for His never failing truth and understanding. I look back at the journey I have had to take through Celebrate Recovery to bring balance to the chaos in my life, and now the blessing to come with being able to help people use Celebrate Recovery as a tool to implicate peace and joy in their own lives. I have used these same tools to continue my obedience and submission to Christ as a wife, mother, and employee. God has taken my tragedy and used it as a testimony of my faith. Most of all, I thank God that, unlike Delilah, mine is not a life wasted, and that He chose to spare me rather to erase me from history as He did Delilah. I am no longer defined by my past mistakes and failure. It's only by God's grace that today, when I look at myself in the mirror, I no longer see myself as someone trying to be perfect, or an adulterer, or an alcoholic, or an anorexic. I see myself as an incredible, blessed mother, wife, and forgiven child of God. In corporate America, I used to fly every week and find myself in uncompromising situations because of my husband's absence. Ironically, God is using the very same pattern of flying that was so instrumental in virtually destroying my life to restore me to wholeness. Today I have to Today I get to serve on the Celebrate Recovery conference team, where it is my privilege to travel every other week to different cities nationally and internationally to help coordinate Celebrate Recovery's one-day ministries. My accountability team now spans nationwide as I fill my life with godly men and women from whom I seek guidance every day. With an accountability partner in almost every state, there is no hiding. This reminds me of God's promise that says, Even though you are at the ends of the earth, the Lord your God will go and find you and bring you back again. Deuteronomy 3:34. You know, there was a time when I wouldn't admit what a sinner I was, but dishonesty made me miserable and filled my days with frustration. All day and all night your hand was heavy on me. My strength was evaporated like water on a sunny day until I finally admitted my sins to you and stopped trying to hide them. I said to myself, I will confess them to the Lord and you forgive me. All my guilt is gone. Psalms 32, 3 through 5. Thank you for letting me share. And that is Marnie's story and principle for testimony from the Celebrate Recovery's Leader's Guide. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And until next time, one Celebrate Recovery time, one Celebrate Recovery place, one Celebrate Recovery channel. Thank you guys. Until next time.